everyone, and welcome back to my channel. My name is Brie. Hi, if you're new here, or hey, if you've been here before. So today I'm going to do a fun video because today is Valentine's Day. So happy Valentine's Day to everyone out there, no matter what your relationship status is. I hope you have a wonderful day. And it's Friday, so TGIF, guys. Today I'm going to just talk about some of my favorite literary couples of all time. I have some classic ones, some new ones, and maybe a throwback or two of books that I read when I was younger. So let's just get into the video. So the first book I'm going to talk about is something that I read back in high school. It's been a really long time, and I have not reread it. So I'm just going off of my memory, but it's definitely not a book I see, and I don't even know if I've ever seen it on BookTube. I've also come to find, because I didn't use Goodreads when I read this book, and I've come to find now that people hate this series. But my memory, I remember loving it. It was one of the first fae books that I read, and that would be the Need series by Carrie Jones. This follows a girl who, kind of like the stereotypical back in the day YA fantasy books where you have a girl who, had one life, some kind of tragedy happened where she moved and ends up finding out that her family is kind of tied up in the ordeal of pixies. So it's a book based on pixies, and this was one of the first fae books that I've ever read, and that's why it made such an impression on me. I ended up loving them and wanting to seek out a ton more. But I just remember the somewhat love interest, Astley, who is a pixie in this book, and Zara's relationship. It was so interesting to me at the time. I mean, it might not be well done now because I haven't read this book in over 10 years, but I just remember that I liked this dynamic, that Astley, kind of struggled with his pixie nature, but also was a pixie at the core and couldn't help being an asshole at times. And I thought that was very alluring. He was definitely one of those guys who, you probably shouldn't like him, but he's there and it's something captivating and interesting to you and you're just alluring it. And I really liked how Zara and his dynamic was in this book. And that it never was, and this is my memory speaking, but it never was fully okay for them to kind of be attracted to each other, but they had to fight that a lot, and whether it was good or bad. And I do remember I kind of liked the ending of this series because it's not, even though they were kind of coupled at some points, you wouldn't have actually expected the ending, at least in my opinion. So that was just kind of a fun throwback. Maybe one day I will read the series again because I feel like it's definitely a fast pace. It's only 300 pages, and the whole series is like that. There's only 4 books, so maybe I'll give this a reread and I can document my experience rereading it as an adult 10 years later. But just to honor my memory, this was one of my first fae couples that I absolutely adored. Next, I'm going to talk about one of my most recent, absolutely obsessed with love duos, and that would be Lou and Reed from Serpent and Dove by Shelby Mahurin. I've talked about this quite a bit because I just read it at the end of last year, and it's been in a couple of my wrap-ups and favorite videos and all that jazz, but I absolutely love Lou and Reed and their dynamic. They started off as enemies, or potential enemies, because Reed is a witch hunter and Lou is a witch, and they fall into a circumstance where they end up being forced to marry each other and have to kind of figure out how they navigate while slowly actually truly falling in love with each other. I love the dynamic. It's very exciting and engaging, and I just thought they were just very sweet and their personalities meshed very well. I think I'm in for a wild ride with this series. I believe it's going to be a trilogy, and the second one comes out, I think, either August or September of this year. But I'm obsessed, and I can't wait to see where they go. But for now, this was very satisfying to the romantic inside of me. I think everyone can kind of appreciate, being able to identify the flaws in each other while still loving the other person. Next, I'm going to go with a classic book, and that would be Arwen and Aragon from Lord of the Rings, more specifically The Return of the King, the third part of the series. I just love their love so much. I get so, and now as I get older, the more that I watch the movies and I see their love going through the entire series, it gets me so sappy every time. But I just think there's something to the depth of them, which I know their romance isn't played up as much in the movies as I believe it is in the books. But there's definitely something about them of like, you know, Arwen kind of having to face like being mortal and loving a mortal man versus staying alive for the rest of her life and embracing her immortality and choosing him for, you know, who he is, waiting for him, and Aragon just being like a stand-up gentleman and also waiting for her and still loving her despite, you know, knowing that she could make the choice of immortality instead. You know, especially in the movie, there's the part where Eowyn kind of comes and is like, you know, I can be that for you. And he's just like, you know, like respectfully declines because I love someone else and my heart can never be yours. And they're just such a great couple. Come on, guys. I love it so much. And it gets me, like, it just makes me feel like, you know, this is the true love that exists in the world. It's there. It definitely is. And they're just, I don't know, they're beautiful. Also in the movie, they're played by two absolutely beautiful people. So like that adds to it too. But in general, they have such a powerful romance that carries through the entire well, whatever you want to say, if it's a series or the entire book, but it carries through, and they're always fighting to get to each other, which is just so romantic at the end of the day. So the next book / series that I'm going to talk about is one of my favorite book characters and my OG book boyfriend, which would be Adrienne and Sidney from the Bloodlines series. Now, this could be a little bit of spoilery if you haven't read Vampire Academy. There's definitely something to say that if you get to this series and you don't read Vampire Academy, then you'll be spoiled for a small plot point in Vampire Academy. But Adrienne is a vampire and Sidney Sage is an alchemist, and they end up kind of not being forced to work together, but they end up kind of working together because Sidney is trying to help the vampire solve the issues of like spirit using vampires. So Adrienne is a spirit user and is suffering from a lot of mental health and other problems that are coming out of this and him using his magic. So it follows them two and how they slowly start to fall in love. And Adrienne is my favorite character, and still to this day one of my favorite characters of all times. And I feel like he's so complex and complicated and generally a good guy, but has kind of been forced to act like he's indifferent because he's been suffering for so long, and Sidney kind of sees past that and really gives him the chance that he deserves. And they just have such a wonderful flowing, because it's 6 books long, this series, but they have a wonderful slow burn romance throughout it. And it probably does happen fast in this like series in general, but because you get to see their love expand for 6 books, you definitely feel like, you know, they're meant to be together. And I just love how, you know, they fight and kick ass together, but they also have like this like desire to just live simply and just enjoy what the other one has to bring home every night. And I love that. So this is one of those times where the book series has a happy ending, and like I'm just all for it because I just wanted these characters to be happy from the original Vampire Academy series. I loved them. They were 2 standouts for me, and when I heard that they were getting their own series together, I was like, thank you. So powered through this one. A little bit older now. This one obviously came after Vampire Academy. Vampire Academy was published in the 2000s. This one, I believe, was 2011. I do remember distinctly reading it when I was in college, because I think I had sat on this a little bit longer than I normally would with series, especially given my 2 favorite characters. But I remember being so busy with college, and I just started binging it, I think, in 2013 or 2014. And I just went through like 2 months and ripped through them. But overall, one of my favorites, and one day I will definitely reread both series, Vampire Academy and Bloodlines, because I do also in the Vampire Academy love Rose and Dimitri, but of the 2 series, I'm going to pick this as my favorite romance. So second to last, but I'm going to pick another semi-new favorite couple, and that will be Riel and Audra from the Furyborn series by Claire Legrand. So I've talked about this quite a bit too, because it's one of my favorite series. Kind of falls into the new adult category more so than YA. So I feel like if you like young adult or adult fantasy, you will like this book. And it essentially follows these 2 different timelines where you have 2 women who are somehow connected. In the first book, you kind of explore how they're connected, and the war against angels in both timelines. So I think aside from the book, I absolutely love Riel and Audric's relationship. I feel like they're so progressive, especially in like a more medieval kind of fantasy. But it's done very elegantly, because there's definitely people who are against them. You know, Riel is kind of a nobody who ends up making a name for herself because she has magic, and Audric is a prince. So they kind of have the odd side against them, but they also grew up together. And I do think Riel has some kind of political history as well. Like, she's not quite a nobody, but she has grown up with Audric, and no one wants them to be together, to the point where Audric is betrothed to someone else, even though that person knows that Audric will never love her. So it's an interesting dynamic, because it's messy, it's very messy, but they're so true to each other, and they will sacrifice and do anything, even when Riel is tempted to succumb to the power that she has and the allure of the angels that kind of have a say in her power. I just, so far, I love where the story is going, and I love seeing their relationship evolve. And as I've mentioned, they have a very open relationship where they're committed to each other, but they're also, you know, open about sex and open about their problems, and knowing that, you know, they can't hide things from each other, because it will cause more problems than they already have in their life. So overall, I think they're really well done, and the third book comes out this year. It's the final in the series, and I know my heart is gonna break with that couple, but I'm hopefully gonna enjoy it anyway. So the last couple that I'm going to talk about is kind of another classic at this point, and one that's controversial, I believe, so I'm going to end it on this note, but that would be Harry and Ginny from Harry Potter. I definitely know that people, for some reason, hate Ginny and Harry. Some, I think, say that it's, you know, it's too fast or it comes out of nowhere, but I argue that it was a good slow burn, because when we're first introduced to all these characters, Ginny's a little bit younger, and I mean, typically when you look at ages, you know, and not to say that, you know, you could argue that boys are, you know, more immature than girls or whatever, but Ginny presents as very immature at first when she's first introduced to the series in book 2. Obviously, I'm holding up the first one because that was the easiest one to grab, but you pretend I'm holding up, you know, book 6 and 7. But when she's first introduced, she's very immature, and Harry is kind of so new to the wizarding world that he can't even fathom being in a relationship. And as he gets older, he experiments, and he, you know, he has a thing for Cho Chang, and he tries to, like, slowly date other people while also trying to save the world. It's a lot to commit to. But he starts to see Ginny as their own, and they do have this wonderful kind of build up where, you know, as she starts to get older and mature, and they realize that they have so much in common. Like, they both love Quidditch, and they're both very, well, Ginny is a very strong, independent woman, and I feel like she's downplayed so much in the movies, which is a shame. But Harry can really admire that, and I feel like they're just very evenly matched, because, I mean, really, when you think about it, like, Ginny has gone through so much stuff and has still stuck by Harry's side, even when that puts her and her family in danger. I mean, her dad being, like, tortured, her mom having to go save her, even, like, the things that were at stake in book 2 when she was possessed by the journal. Like, she has been so much, but still sees Harry as a redeemable person and not someone that just puts her in danger all the time. She stands her ground, she stands her own, and Harry admires that as well. And I just think it's nice, because I feel like when you're on the same level as someone, you have a very strong relationship and a strong bond to continue to form throughout your years. So personally, I was really happy that Harry ended up with Ginny, because I don't think, I feel like him and Hermione, they could have been fine maybe, but I just never felt that they were good together. They just never struck that romantic bond the way that Harry and Ginny did. And I'm kind of, like I said, I am kind of happy because they were able to grow up and see each other's flaws and, you know, them at their worst and still accept that. So overall, one of my favorite couples of all time. And that's all. That's all I have to say. So I'm going to end it on that note. I could go on and on because there's so many couples that I love in books. Probably, I could say there's probably a lot of couples that I hate as well, but most times if the romance is done well, I'm more compelled to like their story. If it's not done well or it's rushed, then there's a good chance that I'm either going to check out completely of the book or I'm just going to complain the whole time. So I am happy to say that the majority of the time I do like the romances And, you know, without making this video ages long, I'm gonna cut it here and say that those are my favorites. Like I said, there's some that might change. More particularly so, I would say the first book that I mentioned from Need, that one could definitely change because I haven't read it in years, but the rest of this list is pretty solid that I know, like, going forward, I will never, ever say that they're not my favorite couples. So that is my video. Let me know down below who are some of your favorite literary couples, and give me the books that they're from because I might not have read them before, and maybe that'll help me to go check out other books, especially if they're romance, like, or romance based instead of like fantasy like I've been reading. If there's something good, whether it's a classic book or modern, maybe I'll have to check it out. But otherwise, guys, have a great Valentine's Day, and until next time, I'll see you then. Bye!